Okay, joining us on this broadcast tonight to build on the Prime Minister's speech at the India Today conclave, where he speaks of how the focus is shifting from demanding action against corruption to political parties now protesting against action against corruption. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? The Prime Minister very clear that he thinks the agencies are now doing their job. The opposition, though, seems to believe that this is an overreach and agencies are selectively being used against opposition leaders. So what if there's a charge against corruption? They believe the action is not taken equally. Whereas the Prime Minister very clear that if there is a corruption or an act of corruption which is being investigated, action must be taken. What's the harm against that? Joining me for perspective on this broadcast is Dr. Kiran Bedi, well-known anti-corruption activist. She's been a Magsaysay Award winner, IPS officer. She's also been former Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry and been in the BJP. With us also is Anjali Bhardwaj, well-known activist, RTI activist, and tracks what's happening in the anti-corruption space very closely. GVL Narasimha Rao represents the national BJP. Supriya Shrineth is with us representing the Congress. And I want to start by asking Supriya Shrineth about the comments made by Prime Minister Modi at the India Today conclave, where he's basically bringing out the stark fact that earlier political parties, when your government was in power, political parties used to be out on the streets demanding that investigative agencies take action on corruption, whether it was the Commonwealth Games, the 2G case, or so many others. Kiran Bedi and many others made their name in those protests. Now, political parties are protesting against action, whether it is a K. Kavita, whether it is leaders from the Congress, whether it is leaders from the TMC, the likes of Abhishek Banerjee and the others. The action has changed to demanding that there be no action on the issue of corruption. He says this is actually one of the biggest successes of the Modi government, far from thinking of this as a failure, far from being under pressure from the opposition where they're alleging that this is a misuse of agencies. He says, look at each case, look at the evidence the agencies are putting together, and this really shows the mirror to India's opposition. Supriya Shrineth.
I would like to show the mirror to Mr. Modi in the next 40 to 45 seconds that I speak. I'm all for cracking down on corruption. I'm all for bringing the corrupt to the book. You've been in government for 9 long years. Have you been able to convict one? Name me one person on corruption charges. And the answer to that is a big zero and a big no. In fact, the cleansing should begin at home, where Mr. Modi seems to look the other way. And the reason why India's opposition and the reason why a large section of the opinion makers believe that this government's act against corruption is perhaps just a hoodlum to act against the opposition is because there has been a 4-fold increase in ED cases since 2014. And 95% of those cases are against India's opposition. I will give you 3 names. Hemanta Biswa Sarma, Narayan Rane, Suvendu Adhikari, and a 4th one, Mr. Yadurappa. There are very, very damning charges of corruption against them. But the moment they join the BJP, the moment they get into the BJP cleansing washing machine, वो पता नहीं कौन से गंगा जल से कौन से सर्फ से नहा लेते हैं, कि सारे दाग धब्बे हट जाते हैं. Mr. Yadurappa was removed on corruption charges in the state of Karnataka. Today, Mr. Modi is holding his hand and walking across an election-bound state.
Okay, so you've set the context for this debate. You're saying that the process is the punishment. In the last 9 years, no opposition leader has been convicted. Whichever investigative agency you take, their conviction track record, because that's ultimately the proof. You can haul them in front of the cameras, try and rub their nose in the ground, try and make them look like low-lying corrupt officials in the public eye. But none of them, Supriya Shrineth argues, GVL Narasimha Rao, have been convicted under your watch. Not one.
You see, the Congress spokesperson is only proving the Honorable Prime Minister right. They are not able to, the dichotomy is very evident. During the Congress rule, people were on the streets wanting action against corruption. Government came under pressure because the corruption was so humongous, so obvious. Constitutional bodies like the CAG nailed the corruption. So they had no option. There were a series of ministers and MPs who had to resign because they were caught with their hands in the till. Today, there is the whole agitations, the street protests are against exposing corruption. All that Congress spokesperson is saying is, why only target us? Why only our corruption? Nobody in the opposition is saying that we are innocent. Nobody in the opposition is saying that we are not corrupt. They are acknowledging
no, but
that
the
they are
basic
corrupt.
principle of justice is that it's equally
why
served.
Is the government exposing us?
Yes, so the likes of a Himanta
this
Biswa
cannot
Sarma or a
be any greater
Yadurappa,
shamelessness
when
than
they
this.
weren't in the BJP, were being prosecuted and acted against. She's asking why isn't that happening with the same gusto now?
No, every case that was registered, they have proceeded. You have the same Congress spokesperson saying that not too many people have been convicted because the process of the trial in the courts is slow. The number of people where trial has completed, where judgments have been delivered, most of the cases in which ED has filed cases, they have actually been convicted. Look at the track record. But it takes a long time in India. It's a fact
so
that we have
now your argument is valid at some level that if they were to rush through with attempting convictions, the opposition would be upset saying that the case is only half done, not fully investigated, and you've gone and convicted XYZ opposition politician. He's saying we're letting the agencies do their job, not trying to get them to rush. And you're only proving the Prime Minister's point, Supriya, because you're not saying these people aren't corrupt. You're only saying, what about BSY, what about Himanta? But look at the specific charges against each, whether it's a K. Kavita, whether it is a Manish Sisodia or those in the Congress, those cases are being looked at purely from merit by the investigative agencies. Supriya.
No, not at all. I am not proving the Prime Minister right or wrong. I am only simply questioning the vendetta politics that he's trying to do in the name of cleansing the country of corruption. I have only 30 seconds of something to say and let my worthy colleague from the BJP answer that question. The BJP's Karnataka government, the next election that's going to happen in this country, in Karnataka, is plagued and saddled with corruption charges. It's called a 40% commission government, not just by the opposition, but by their own. Santosh Patil was one of your workers who died saying that 40% commission has to be paid to them. The Contractor Association has written to the Prime Minister, who's chosen to look the other way. The son of an MLA was caught by the Lokayukta and red-handed with bribe of 40 lakh. The total was 80 lakh. Would have come to him, 8 crores worth of cash was found. Why does the ED, the CBI, the income tax, SFIO not land at their doorstep? That's the simple question I'm trying to raise. Because corruption charges against opposition leaders are being leveled to assassinate and to malign their reputation. And the process is the punishment. 9 years is a long enough time for you to bring the guilty
GVL Narasimha Rao.
You cannot do
you
that.
Know, there are ultimately whoever controls the investigative agencies also controls the nature of the investigation. There are charges against Karnataka BJP leaders. There are charges against others who've been in the BJP. If the agencies don't prosecute them in any gusto, we will never know whether those corruption cases were true or not. You're pursuing the cases against the likes of K. Kavita, Satinder Jain, Manish Sisodia, Congress leaders with a certain sense of passion. Supriya argues that passion is missing when it comes to investigating your own.
You see, I can only say this is opposition's brazenness in not claiming even innocence, because the cases are still in an investigation stage and a charge sheet stage. They are not even claiming innocence. They are only saying,
no, but who has said that they are guilty? None of these, whether it's Kavita, whether it's Sisodia, they're all claiming. No, that's not fair. Everyone's claiming innocence. Who's saying that they are guilty? No one has come out and said we are guilty.
Rahul, cases, the investigation, in most of the cases, the investigation is happening under the supervision of the courts. The ministry, the office, the minister's office does not monitor or conduct investigations. All these agencies, they are accountable to the judiciary. They are all accountable to a body like the statutory body like the CVC.
Okay, Anjali Bhardwaj, you are neither BJP nor Congress. We are seeing this tutu meme. You've been an anti-corruption activist even under the UPA era. How do you look at the Prime Minister's comments? There is a certain factuality to them that earlier protests were asking for action against corruption. Now the protests are against the action against corruption. How do you see this change?
Well, Rahul, I think what is very clear is that there needs to be decisive action and investigation into all cases of corruption. Wherever there is an allegation of corruption, there must be independent and empowered bodies to look into those cases and investigate them and take them to their logical conclusion. In fact, the whole movement against corruption, the demand for Lokpal came from there, where people said that the only way to fight corruption in any country is to have independent and empowered bodies that will take up these cases and take them to the logical conclusion. Otherwise, if these bodies are not independent, whether it is the ED, the CBI, or the Lokpal, if these bodies are not independent, they will selectively work for the government, will not go after people who are high functionaries in the government, and will go after those who oppose the government, either politically or are critical of the government's policies. Now, unfortunately, what is happening today is that we are seeing that there is very selective targeting, it would seem, of people who are either in the political opposition or are opposing the government's policies and are inconvenient, therefore, to the government. Now, I think that the Lokpal, the ED, the CBI, and it's not just us, even if you look at the Supreme Court, they are saying that the appointments to these bodies are very important to make sure that they can work independently. And unfortunately, these appointments are not happening in a proper way. The government is deciding who to appoint, and therefore, the people who are occupying these positions are not those who can work independently.
Okay, let GVL Narasimha Rao respond to your argument about selectively targeting those who are politically inconvenient. You are supporting the Lokpal protest when Anjali, Arvind Kejriwal, Anna Hazare and the others were out on the streets. Appointment to investigative agencies is still done basis whoever you think will do your bidding and not be inconvenient politically.
Can I please come in?
Let GVL speak first.
Rahul, these allegations are completely unfounded and baseless. Because what charges do you, what investigation can you do against any ministry, any minister or official in Modi ji's government? We have been in government for 9 years. I'm challenging these people. Have you been able to even make an iota of allegation against any of our decisions? The only time Rahul Gandhi went to the court, he had made false allegations and he had to apologize before the Supreme Court in the case of Rafale. So you cannot, this is a government that has qualitatively completely changed the integrity quotient of a government. 10 years of completely rottenly corrupt UPA.
Okay, Supriya, respond to this, that when you were in power, 2G, when you were in power, Commonwealth Games, there were a scam a dozen. The Prime Minister said at the conclave, na khaunga na khane dunga, that's the mission that I came with and that's what I am living up to every single day.
That's the trouble. आधी लाइन सुनी थी देश ने, न खाऊंगा न खाने दूंगा, सब कुछ अदानी को खिला दूंगा. देश ने आधी लाइन सुनी थी, बोली उन्होंने पूरी थी, वो हम सबकी गलती है. Just reminding this country about what is happening. They really want to talk about corruption and a crackdown. There is a corporate in this country that has been plagued with charges of money laundering, of Benami shell companies, of actually shielding and actually lying on record about their directors, about action that should be taken by ED, CBI, Income Tax, the Director of Revenue Intelligence, SFIO, MCA, RBI, SEBI, IRDA. Not a word on the Adani group, and they will hide behind a Supreme Court committee. Sorry, you cannot, because the Supreme Court committee has been set up to review the regulatory framework. It has nothing to do with the Adani scam. The parliament is being stalled by the ruling government to not let an Adani probe by the JPC happen. They are going to talk about corruption. I can't imagine
that when there is a charge of corruption, you don't allow it to be investigated. Argues Supriya Shinde, take the Hindenburg charges against the Adani group. If you don't allow for them to be investigated, how will you ever know whether there was corruption or not?
Rahul, it is not Hindenburg. Don't get misled. Don't get misled. It is not Hindenburg. There are grave charges of money laundering
plaguing the Adani group? Where are the guys who probe
let
money
GVL
laundering?
Narasimha Rao
Where is
respond
ED?
to
I
it.
want to
GVL,
know. Where
unless
is
the
JPC?
investigative agencies investigate these cases, we'll never know the truth, says Supriya.
No, there are institutions in this country, much like what Congress party would like to go and wrongly propagate everywhere in the world. The institutions are still thriving, they are working. There is a lot for India to be proud about. I think if you have such a, instead of depending on a shady Hindenburg report, why doesn't Congress party come out with those facts? You can't really hide behind a shady short seller and use that report to destabilize India's economy, to destabilize India's government. Every time a parliament session begins, this is a charge against the opposition. Every time parliament session begins, you have something like this comes up. I don't know what Hindenburg was waiting for. Is this a coordinated Congress party attempt? Pegasus happens just before the parliament session, monsoon session.
Okay, Supriya, very quickly, I want to go across to Dr. Bedi as well. Supriya, very quickly, please.
Is this not a coordinated attack on India's democracy?
Very quickly. You know, I don't think, okay, don't sweat. We are all here doing a civil debate. You know, it shocks me, the brazenness of the BJP. This has nothing to do with the Hindenburg report. Adani is supposed to be probed by SEBI. And we were told that they were probing since July 2021. 18 महीने हो गए. कहाँ है वो probe report? उसका जवाब है आपके पास.
No, but how can GVL speak for SEBI?
You just lied on television.
GVL can't speak for SEBI. SEBI has to speak for SEBI.
No,
what was then Ashok Gehlot doing with Adani?
No,
what was Ashok Gehlot doing with it? What was Chief Minister Chhattisgarh doing with Adani last June?
That SEBI was probing.
6 महीने पहले क्या कर रहे थे उनके साथ?
One second. The fact that SEBI needs to... No, one second. I don't think there can be any... Don't speak over each other. I don't think there can be any quarrel with the argument that SEBI needs to come out and declare what happened in that investigation. We heard from a member of the government in parliament that they are investigating that even before the Hindenburg charges came out. Everyone deserves an answer on what happened in that case. Everyone deserves to know what happened in that investigation. Only then will we know whether this is correct or not. I want to go across to Dr. Kiran Bedi. Dr. Bedi, the Prime Minister spoke of how headlines are about corrupt taking to the streets to protect action against corruption cases. You've been part of many big anti-corruption agitation. You're also, seeing how opposition thinks that this is one-sided and skewed action against politically inconvenient figures. How do you see this change between 2013 to 2023?
I do see a big change. I have seen the way the government of the day has got things delivered. And I'm speaking only through personal experience. I think the direct bank transfer and digitally economizing or digital economy has made here a huge dent in the pilferage, in the leakages, and in ensuring that it's also made sure that money reaches sources directly. I've seen this, so therefore mine is not a hearsay, nor is it a suggested, but seen. And till 2 years ago, I saw it directly. So therefore, I'm a witness to direct check of corruption. So I can say that in the limited experience I've had, that there is a massive change. Secondly, I think the way the economy has opened up more and the social media, it's playing a very vital role in exposing corruption wherever anybody has dared to put it on the table. And the social media handles of Twitter, of Instagram, or of Facebook, where somebody can put up a video and it's made the difference. So I think the alertness against corruption has certainly heightened. Chances of getting caught have also increased. And the kind of scale of the scams which were existing earlier have considerably reduced. Now the people are getting more and more, the certainty of getting caught is becoming higher. And the digital forensics is playing a very good role. So I think there is a big change in the corruption exposure. and demand is now, since 2013, as you mentioned.
Okay, let me put that question to Anjali Bhardwaj. This aspect of there being more fear, more deterrence, the fear of action by the Modi Sarkar, and that is likely reducing high-level corruption, argues Dr. Kiran Bedi. The kind of open, blatant corruption that we saw and used to hear about earlier, it may not have completely ended at the lower to middle levels, but at the higher levels, the instinct is towards more transparency, towards e-tenders, about having an open way where everybody can jump in rather than skewing it by taking money from corporate houses. Anjali.
Rahul, I cannot hear you very clearly, but I want to just say that if the Prime Minister is worried about this phenomenon and wants to understand it, a very simple way is to say that if a government is hesitant to allow anti-corruption bodies to function independently, if a government tries to appoint people so that it may influence or it may look like it is influencing the functioning of those independent bodies, then there will be a perception amongst people that it is trying to hide its own corruption, exonerate people who join it, and drop those cases through investigative agencies and target those that go against it. It is very simple. I don't want to get into any political slugfest, but I think the important issue here is that there are bodies across the world that are given the task of independently and in an empowered way look into cases of corruption, irrespective of whether they involve the government and its functionaries or any opposition.
Dr. Bedi, when we look at the progress
independent bodies don't function, then there will be this perception and people will take to streets, whether it is the political opposition or it is
Dr. Bedi, when we look at the progress made in cases and the rate of conviction under the NDA, it leaves much to be desired. 95% of the cases against political personnel being against opposition leaders, and in those cases the conviction rate very, very poor. So you have the specter of investigation, you have investigative agencies calling people for questioning, like Kavita was questioned today, Manish Sisodia in jail, Satinder Jain in jail, many Congress leaders in and out after bail, but there hasn't been any conviction, and ultimately the true test of the investigation is whether they get a conviction from court or not.
Look, when the king, let's say when the king or when the leader, Tatha Raja, Tatha Praja, I think Tatha Raja, Tatha Praja makes a lot of difference. When the Raja, in this case, the Honorable Prime Minister, is presumed, perceived, believed, trusted to be honest, to be above board, not to be involved in any scam, I think it's made a big dent in that sense that it's considerably reduced. There is a trust which has got reposed in the manner in which it governs. So I think that itself is a very big gain. When the secretary of a department, when the chief minister of a particular state, and when the minister of a particular portfolio and the prime minister himself is above board, all this reduces corruption considerably. You cannot eliminate corruption.
No, but there are cases where there is corruption charges against leaders when they are in opposition. When they somehow seem to join the BJP, that entire investigation seems to lose its steam. Then, Dr. Bedi, they're not probing with the same intensity that they were when that leader was in opposition, and this has happened in multiple cases.
We are a democracy. We are a democracy.
Can I please come?
Dr. Bedi.
Onus is, if you're making an allegation of corruption against anybody, the onus is on you. Go about, catch it young. Onus is on you then. Catch them. And if you're in the public domain, and particularly in politics, you can find, if you finding the particular seat or a minister or a particular MLA or an elected representative corrupt, then you can find ways and means to get them, to get at them, and then use the social media.
Okay.
If you have evidence, not being defamatory. So the onus is on you to catch them red-handed. Get the evidence.
Let Anjali and Supriya both respond to that. that if there is any corruption that you see, Supriya, against any member in the BJP, let the opposition come out and reveal whatever charge of corruption there is, that will be investigated and probed in the manner in which every case is.
You know how ironical it is, how very ironical it is that the Indian opposition, led by the Congress party and Rahul Gandhi, is staring into the government and asking them to come clean on Adani, and you're asking me that we should. They are stalling parliament because they don't want to speak on Adani. They are not letting their probe agencies probe Adani. It's so ironical and so rich for us to be told that we should. That's exactly what we are doing, because there is too much of government relevance to this. You know, petty troll ministers are actually out there to protect Adani. I have something else to ask Ms. Bedian, because I'm not here to sing peals of either the Prime Minister or anything else. She was at the forefront of the Lokpal movement. India's Lokpal has an acting chairperson. Can she explain to me why do we not have a full-time Lokpal, and what is her view on that? Can she explain to me that why did Delhi High Court issue notice to the centre on a plea that sought details of Lokpal selection? Can anybody in this audience or you know, on this panel answer the question that why did the Supreme Court feel the need for the election commissioners and the chief election commissioner to be appointed by a panel instead of the whims and fancies of one government order alone? I mean, these are questions that should be raised and asked, and it's very rich for anybody to tell me. And I will take 10 seconds and point out to GVL Narasimha Rao that either you be prepared for a defamation notice or you withdraw your statement. Mr. Gandhi never went to court on the Rafale scam. He did not tender an unapologetic yea. He was asked, did he quote the Supreme Court? And to which he said, quoting the Supreme Court was wrong.
Let GVL Narasimha Rao respond to that.
Corrected. You are a member of parliament. Stop lying on television.
Let GVL respond also to the argument about the Lokpal. The Lokpal is a acting Lokpal, doesn't seem to be empowered, hasn't done anything of any consequence.
Rahul, on Rahul Gandhi's apology, it is a fact that he lied about Supreme Court's observations. He was asked to apologize, which he didn't do properly earlier. Later, he had to apologize unconditionally. And for misquoting the Supreme Court, and for his allegations have been thrown out of the window. The process that was adopted, I did not interrupt.
No, Supriya, you must let GVL speak. Supriya, let GVL speak. He was listening to you patiently. Let GVL respond and then we'll go back to him.
I did not interrupt you.
Good for him.
Go on, GVL.
Yeah, on the specific allegations that were made in on Rafale, the entire process was examined by the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said the process was fine. So where did that leave Rahul Gandhi? It left him totally, left his face completely darkened. And as far as cases of Enforcement Directorate are concerned, there was a media release by Enforcement Directorate because they speak for themselves. 25 cases only have reached the judgment stage, and 24 cases out of 25 people have been convicted.
When are you calling Hemanta Biswa Sarma for questioning next?
In 24 out of 25 cases. It's a more than a 95%. It's a more than a 95% conviction rate. I think you know each of the cases that ED is probing today, they will all be convicted.
Where is the conviction rate more than 95%?
And they have abiding faith in
Where
ED.
Is the conviction rate more than 95%?
No, I did not interrupt you. Please
let
me complete.
Okay, I want to get Dr. Kiran Bedi's views on this, because when you were part of the anti-corruption movement, one of the main tools against corruption was supposed to be the Lokpal and the Lokayukt Act. Give us your sense of how effective do you think the Lokpal, in the way that you would have imagined it, has been in curbing corruption or playing a role in the fight against corruption?
That is based, that answer should be based on evidence, a survey, and analysis. I think maybe you can run a serial, media could run a serial on which are the cases which are before the Lokpal and have not seen the light of the day. What are those cases? What basis on which a Lokpal or Lokayukta? Why not Lokayukta? We also have the Lokayuktas. So let's look at Lokpal and Lokayukta, their performance, cases before them, and why have they been delayed in according of sanction. I think that needs to be looked at from an analytical, evidentiary point of view, rather than being generic. You can do a series on Lokayuktas, you can do a series on Lokpals. But wherever they are effective and functioning, they're capable of delivering. It's recently delivered a case in Karnataka. Recently. Now, why they did not deliver earlier, why they delivering now, that's a matter of endless debate. But I think this answer is, I personally think, depends on the evidence to collect as a series of the performance of Lokpals.
No, so we'll do that. I hear what you're saying. It's an important investigation. We'll look at what they've done so far. They haven't done very much. They went after Virupakshapa, the BJP leader in Karnataka. Outside of that, they haven't done very much. The Lokpal itself. Anjali, your thoughts on the manner in which this Lokpal was envisioned and any data you may have on the actual delivery of the Lokpal?
Look, Rahul, we have to be very clear that our country is a democracy. Finally, those who are elected have to be accountable to the people of the country. In a democracy, the only way that can happen, and especially on issues of corruption, is if independent agencies are able to do their work in an unbiased way. When people took to the streets, the BJP was very much there demanding a Lokpal and a Lokpal law. Why was no Lokpal appointed for 5 years is something that is a question that all Indians have asked. After fighting with people on the street, standing with them and saying that we also think that there is a need for a Lokpal. When the BJP came to power, not a single Lokpal was appointed for 5 years.
Now that there is an acting Lokpal, how is that going? You would be tracking this carefully. How is that going, Anjali?
And even when the Lokpal was appointed, the appointment process was vitiated to make sure that it was basically a government panel that selected the Lokpal. And therefore, we don't need to even do evidentiary collection of evidence of what are the cases that the Lokpal has been doing. I have not heard of any serious case being taken up by the Lokpal and seen to its logical conclusion in the last 9 years. I can say, as someone who works against corruption and who spoke in the previous regime and continues to speak in this regime against corruption, that it is highly disappointing that a government that came to power on a party that came to power on the plank of anti-corruption, on saying that we will give the best Lokpal, we will give best Lokayuktas, we will put in a grievance redress and whistleblower mechanism, has today failed the people of
let GVL Narasimha Rao respond to that
counts.
charge that there isn't action by the Lokpal. You benefited politically from the movement of Anna Hazare. When you came to power for a long time, you forgot about it. Even when you appointed an acting Lokpal, the institution hasn't delivered anything of any consequence.
No, it's even more disconcerting. It's even more shameful. It's even more dangerous to see those who fought for the Lokpal movement shoulder to shoulder with Anjali, Dr. Anjali, who were compatriots in that movement. They are today accused of rampant corruption. I don't know whether that really makes her hang her head in shame or not. Our government has nothing to really feel ashamed about. We have given 9 years of, that is our promise to the people. We said we will give you a corruption-free government, which is what we have done for 9 years. That is what people are assessing us. And those who came with this charade of fighting corruption on an anti-corruption Lokpal agenda, today they are neck deep in corruption and people have lost all their belief on them. They have continued to have trust in the leadership.
Okay, I want to show our viewers, before I wrap up, some more excerpts from what the Prime Minister said at that big India Today conclave speech, which is being discussed so widely all across, being looked at so extensively on television, on social, on digital, on YouTube, etc.